first and foremost, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. In general, our goal is to get as many students as we can applying to REUs and successfully applying to REUs. That's really a simple goal. I run an REU as well, as I'll introduce in a minute. And if I'm being totally blunt, I'd like to see more applications this year. And this is part of the reason why I'm doing this. Giselle was kind enough to do this for the National Council for Undergraduate Research, where she broadcasted like a webinar to the whole US. And we thought to ourselves, we should just do that over again, specifically focused on people in the Front Range. And so that sort of was the impetus for building the slide deck and the panel and coming back to you all. So with that, Giselle, it's all yours.
Yeah, let's start by first introducing ourselves. So my name is Giselle, and I am a first-year grad student in material science and the Colorado School of Mines.
So yeah, I'm Eric Toberer. I'm an associate professor in the physics department here at Mines, although technically I'm actually trained as a chemist. And I run one of the two Mines REU sites, sort of in my quote unquote spare time. Vladan, looks like you're next.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Vladan Stevanovic. I'm a professor in the Metallurgical and Materials Engineering department. And I guess my role here, or the reason why am I part of this, is because that over the years I was accepting students from the REU program, so may have some experience in how this works from the advisor side.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel. I'm a second-year PhD in Eric's group, and I've helped run the Materials REU here at Mines.
Great, thank you everyone. And so here's a brief outline of what we'll discuss today. We'll first give an overview of what an REU is. We'll go over who should apply, the application process, tips, interviewing tips, resources, and then at the end, we'll have a panel discussion where you could ask questions. So for my experience in doing undergraduate research, I did my undergrad at CU Boulder, and I worked in the research group for my sophomore and junior year. And I personally didn't participate in an REU. I participated in a SULI, which stands for Science Undergraduate Laboratory Internships. And this is pretty similar to an REU. And a lot of what we will be covering today would be, useful for if you want to apply for REU, apply for this or any sort of undergraduate research opportunities. And from my first SULI, I was able to publish a first author paper for my work. And then all of these experiences helped get me into grad school, where I'm just continuing to do research and furthering my studies. So for those interested in applying for an REU, REU stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates, which is a program that supports active research participation by undergraduate students in any of the areas of research funded by the National Science Foundation. So that basically just says that it's a program that funds undergrads to do research through funding the programs facilitated at different universities or REU sites. So why would we want to participate in an REU? Some obvious benefits are, gaining research experience, gaining technical and professional skills, and those are always great things to put on your resume. And this program is also a great opportunity to make connections. And of course, you get a great stipend that you can save up or spend because room and board is usually also covered. If you were interested in the SULI that I mentioned, it's another popular one students apply to. They generally pay a little bit more, but they don't cover room and board. So at the end, you get the same amount. And there's some programs that even have a travel grant. So make sure you read their description carefully and take advantage of what they provide. So what are the odds of getting into a program? So for REU specifically, there are 735 REU sites and about 10 students at each site. And here's just like a list of all the different subjects involved. Our site here at Mines is fairly new and we get about 50 applications each year. One question other students had was how many sites should they apply for? And I personally applied to only one my freshman year because I was very picky and I didn't get in. But I later met someone who told me they applied to 8 different sites and they got into 2 of them. Here's just a few different examples of REU sites. And as you can see, there's a wide range and they could be very technical or not technical at all. So who should apply? Basically anyone who is an undergrad in STEM. If you are interested in a particular research topic or field and would like to explore that interest, this could be a great opportunity for that. And I also want to add anyone who enjoys solving problems should apply because that's really what research is, in my opinion. There's a lot of people solving the same problems and your effort could really be useful. And I think students at both 2-year and 4-year colleges can apply. And while there are certain sites that require 4-year colleges though, so make sure you check on their description before you apply. And some sites also like to focus on getting more people from underrepresented groups to join. So if you're in one of those groups, you could look out for those. So next, let's move on to the actual application process. So for REUs, each REU site has their own application, but it's generally the same materials that they ask for, which includes your personal information, school transcript, GPA, and there usually is a minimum GPA requirement, but it's typically not that high. And then a statement of purpose or a list of paragraph or essay response questions. And then lastly, about 2 to 3 reference letters. So the first step of this process is actually to identify your reference letter writers. You want to make sure you ask them early to give them plenty of time to write. And then you also want to thank them for doing this for you. And so these are people who can vouch for you. If you're not the best at selling yourself, they could be there to make up for that. And if you are great at selling yourself, well, they could make your application even stronger. So they're very important. You want to maybe meet with them if possible. And if not, you would want to give them all the information they need. So let them know exactly what you're applying for, how excited you are for the opportunity, and then how important it is for you. And also make their work easier by reminding them how they know you. So some examples would be, maybe what semester you took their class, how long you worked for them, and what you accomplished with them, etc. But to submit a good application, it's important that you research the project. You want to be able to pinpoint the aspects that interest you and then look to find hints of what they might be looking for in a participant. And then you could tie those things into your application so that the application reviewers can be able to check those checkboxes. So when you want to make a point, it's best to not just say it, but to show it. For example, don't just state, I am a good problem solver. You want to maybe provide a story of a time you encountered a challenging problem and then talk about how you solved it. You want to let the reviewers be the one drawing those conclusions instead of just telling them. Most reviewers aren't really looking for students who are already good at and capable of doing everything, but they would like to find someone who has that potential to do that. I also want to make sure you answer to the prompt and pay attention to the details of what they're asking for. So for both the REU and SULI, each student at a site will get assigned to work with a group. And this doesn't always happen, but it would be great if a professor or PI would just go to the program director and tell them that they want you in their group. And that was my experience, and it could be yours too. And the key is just to make your own connections. You could maybe do that by emailing the person you want to work with, show them your interest in the work done in their group, and then ask them some thoughtful questions. If they respond, you could tell them that you're applying for this program and you like to work with them. So when you ask questions, the key is to not ask questions that are too easy, that just takes a Google search. And you don't want to ask questions that take an entire lecture to answer. You want to be able to let them see that you made the effort, and maybe you could have them point you to papers. So for interviews can really go both ways. You can also take the time at the end to interview them and make sure this is a good fit for you, and you could get your important questions answered as well. So a well-formulated question would be one where you could tell them a little bit about yourself. For example, you want to ask a question, if you want to ask a question that is project specific, one example would be, I am very interested in the blank part of project X and have read a number of papers on it. Is that a possible project I could work on within the scope of an REU? Another example that's more about skill development would be, one weakness I still have is public speaking, and I would love to be able to work on that. Will there be workshops or presentations that would allow me to do so? So both these questions let the interviewer know that you know yourself well, and you know what you want out of this opportunity, and that you're willing to put in that effort. Some good resources to help you in the application process is NSF's database for all the REU sites. So in this database, you could search by different fields you might be interested in, specific keywords or locations. And professors are also a great resource because they probably know more people than you think they do, and they could maybe set you up with connections, or they could even just give you more insight on choosing the projects. And also, most campuses have writing centers, and those are great for reading your statement of purpose or essay responses. All right, so the remainder of the seminar is for the panelists to answer questions. And here's like a reminder of who they are and their experiences related to REU specifically. We will have our panelists answer a few commonly asked questions to start off, but if you have any questions that's not on here, please feel free to ask in the chat.
Cool, thanks, Rizal. I'll start us off. She's gone. Uh-oh. Giselle, are you moderating or am I moderating?
I think we said you're moderating.
I'm moderating. All right, cool. Yeah, so let's start with timing. So ideally, when do you need to start applying for an REU?
I can take that one first. I would say that the best time to start looking at REUs is pre-Christmas break, because a lot of them have deadlines that are within the first 3 months of the spring semester. So making sure that you sort of start the search of maybe where you want to go before, and then you can spend some time when you don't have to focus on classes during Christmas break to sort of start prepping your applications.
Agreed. Yeah. Let's talk about skills. What skills should I have, and what should I do if I don't even have a major yet, or if my major is incredibly broad? Bon, you want to take this one? What do you expect when you bring a student on from an REU?
Well, that's a tricky business, because I mean, in general, I don't really have specific expectations. The expectation that I have as an advisor, honestly, is to have a student who is interested in doing something.
Yes. Agreed.
That's probably-
Motivation.
Motivation and curiosity are probably there. Those are not skills; those are something else. But probably to be successful in my group, a little bit of math and some rational thinking when approaching problems is probably not even required but desired. But that's about it.
Yeah. Other comments from the committee or panel on skills? Rachel.
I would definitely agree with Vladin, especially if you're applying for a less experimental RU, like say you're a computer scientist or you're interested in doing computers, or interested in doing math-based or engineering-based stuff. Having a math class under your belt is really good. I would say maybe try to have some good written and presentation, like communication skills, or at least have a goal to use an RU to sort of develop those.
Yeah. I mean, so sort of put it on like my RU program director hat here and breaking the fourth wall and answering my own question. I think when I look back at the applications we've gotten over the years, we've had to turn away some community college students because they were just finishing up algebra, and that made me maybe nervous about their overall level of preparation. I think I wrote them and I was like, please come back next year. Like, you just need it to be, in school a little bit longer. And then we've got a question from Mary over here about types of majors, which is, I think, is sort of tightly connected to this question. So yeah, Rachel, what are your thoughts on types of majors?
It looks like this question is directed to the Mines Materials RU. So obviously materials science, materials engineering is a great help. I think chemical engineering would also work well. Our materials RU is materials and data science RU. So data science or computer science major with an interest in material science would also be a good fit.
Yeah, I think that's the key answer here, right? Is like, it's not about, so for our RU at least, it's not necessarily about what your major is. We've had a bunch of mechanical engineers, we've had a bunch of chemists, we've had the occasional physicist come through. We've had one or two data scientists and one or two computer scientists. I think they maybe take more internships in industry over the summer. But yeah, I mean, I think as Rachel said, like an interest in material science is definitely the key bit there. Now other RUs will have a different answer, right? So if you're going to go to like the Scripps Institute down in San Diego and do marine biology, like my guess is that they're going to have a fairly narrow focus in terms of what majors they'll take. But even then, I bet you could still come up with a list of 4 or 5 majors that like are pretty close to each other. The thing to understand about the majors, right, is that it's unlikely that there's only a very narrow suite of projects. The projects are sort of by definition pretty broad, because you, as an RU director, you have to go around to the faculty and be like, hey, do you have a position for a student? And you tend to only put 1, maybe 2 students with faculty members. And so you end up having, on the order of 6 to 10 different faculty members who are part of the RU in a given summer. And so their skill sets are going to be very broad. And so as such, we're sort of playing this matching game between students, majors, and the faculty that we have who are participating. Yeah, cool. We got some good questions in chat, so maybe we should keep pushing on those. So like most recently, because it's super cross-cutting, Jody's asking about the time commitment for a research position and how much do they vary? Giselle, you want to take that one?
Time commitment. So I've only done a SULI, and for SULI, it's 10 weeks for the summer and 16 weeks if you do it in spring and fall.
And how about weekly?
It's you have to, for SULI, you have to log your hours. So you get paid up to 40 a
Mhm.
week.
Yeah. And an REU is not going to make you log your hours. It's just going to assume that you're a responsible human. And it'll also assume a total of 40 hours, of which probably 4 or 5 will be some sort of like formal professional or technical development. And the rest will be working one-on-one with somebody else who's doing research.
Yeah, and I want to add that I definitely worked way more than 40 hours and I didn't get paid for overtime,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I was able to get a paper out of it. So
Yeah, you kick butt. There's no doubt about that.
That's not required though.
it's not required.
No, I've done several summer internships where actually all of them that I worked were 40 hours and sometimes less if you're taking like a Friday off.
Yeah. As like a research advisor, it can be hard to actually come up with a project that a student can do 40 hours a week, unless there's like a lot of sort of tedious component to it. Another easy one, Avalon's asking about applications fees. No, there's almost, I'm not sure even we're allowed to do application fees, even if we wanted to. But in general, REUs are mainly just trying to get as many people to apply as possible. And I think anybody who's running an REU cares about equity. And so like the last thing we'd want to do is have an application fee, right? And keep people away who might otherwise be excited to come. Anybody want to take on letter writers and who we should get to write letters for us?
I can take that one.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I would say that make sure your letter writers are people who you know will be able to give you a glowing recommendation and also who will be able to convey that well. So I know this question is asking about a coach as well as a professor. I think that if that is your sort of only option, like if you haven't built very many relationships with professors, then I think that would be an okay option because a coach is akin to a supervisor. I would say for science-based REUs, very much looking for people like what your abilities are in that specific realm of science. And I know there are a lot of skills that would translate from being on a team, but I think professors are probably sort of the ideal candidate for a recommendation letter.
Yeah, I mean, to Vladim's point from a minute ago, ultimately we want people who show up with curiosity and enthusiasm and aren't a giant pain in the ass, right? Because we're gonna spend actually a fair amount of our summer with you. And so as a product of that, the coach is not a terrible one in that they can speak to these other aspects of your personality, but certainly at a minimum, I would think you'd want at least one letter from a faculty member. And then Andrew's asking a follow-on question about writing letters now. That's going to depend REU to REU. So like my REU is structured so that we ask letter writers afterwards, because the last thing we want to do is waste somebody's time writing a letter if the application isn't going to move forward. But other people will use, other REUs will use the letter writers as part of a first round down selection. So you just have to sort of be cognizant of which REUs you're applying to. And then there's maybe another easy one that doesn't really require a full panel, which is, are there other REUs at Mines besides the materials REU? There is, it's on underground tunneling. So the whole focus of the REU is taking like, basically building tunnels, right? I don't know anything beyond that, but I think that's amazing that there's a whole REU just devoted to digging holes. So I don't know.
One comment, just going back to the writing your letters now or later, that might be a difference between a including a reference in your application or a letter of recommendation. So maybe look for that wording, because a reference, they don't need to be writing them now, but if they ask for a letter, then they do.
Yeah, I agree. And when if you're going to put down somebody as a reference, it's usually good form to, shall we say, actually double check that they're willing to be a reference, lest they're quite surprised. Going way back up to the top, Paul asked the question about the percentage of RUs that get offered PhD positions at the same institution. Vlad, and this might be a good one for you. How much does working with an undergraduate influence your interest in bringing them back for more than a summer? Sure,
Likely a lot. It didn't happen because they were undergrads, so they first need to finish their grad school, their undergrad program, and they need to apply to the grad school. But if I had good experience and someone after that writes me a letter saying, I would like to continue grad school with you and I want to apply to Mines, that's a very nice outcome.
Yeah. So like Giselle, for example, you want to say a little bit about the transition from your SULI to what your current situation is? Seems perfect.
Yeah. So I did 2 SULIs in the same group for 2 summers, and so then for grad school, my PI was very interested in having me continue doing, my graduate research work at NUL. So that's what I ended up doing. I did get other offers too, but to me, this is a great group for me, and I work well in it. So that's kind of what I ended up doing.
But you were doing, just a question, you were doing your SULI last summer of your undergrad, correct?
Yeah, I did it the summer after my sophomore year and then the summer after my junior year of undergrad.
Yeah. And I think it works sort of to Paul's question too about like sticking around for either a PhD or a master's. Like it works in both directions. Not only did Giselle get an offer, but Giselle knew what she was getting, right? Like in terms of the people. And that's a big deal. She's going to be working with those people for the next 5 years. That's a long time to work with people. And so you really want to make sure you actually like them.
Mm-hmm.
So then just a piece of advice, feel free to express the interest if you find the work interesting and this is something you want to do. At the end of your REU, just express that interest so that discussions can continue.
Yeah, like warn the professor that you might come knocking again in a couple of years to come hang out. And that may really change the conversation. They may go, oh shoot, you're thinking we're not just dating, we're serious. Okay, let's hang out. Let's see what we can do to build this relationship. Yeah.
I definitely did that, both to get the second SULI, and I guess he knew I was applying for grad school because I asked him for a letter of recommendation.
Yeah. And then Jude, don't worry, I saw your question. It's the question is basically about timescales and REUs, and I think I was like clean enough. I'll just take it. So in general, REUs are not going to be particularly flexible on their dates, and the reason for that is that they're doing typically some sort of like formal lesson plan as well as research. So like for REU, for example, for the first couple of weeks on the professional development side of things, we'll have people give presentations within the REU on topics that they like already knew a lot about before the REU. So there's sort of like a low risk presentation period where we're working with them on making good PowerPoints and how to talk well in front of an audience and how to answer questions and stuff like that. And then increasingly we like ratchet up how challenging the presentations are. We do the same thing on some technical skills as well, but that's like, I think the presentation one's like nice and obvious. So our goal is to sort of increment. And so if people show up late, then they sort of are getting dumped into a situation that may not be particularly healthy for them.
Yeah, I went to a quarter school for my undergrad, so my summers ended up being mid-June to mid-September, and even though I had the full 10 weeks, it was sometimes like pulling teeth to try to get permission to even just start late for a full session.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because there's a lot of group activities, and so like a final poster session, for example, like if Rachel's only at week 7 and everybody else is at week 11, like she's not really going to be able to do a proper poster session at that point.
I know for Sully, they were able to do 2 groups. And then when it was remote, because it's, less of like workshops has to be these specific times, they were able to do 4 groups. So they had 4 different weeks of starting. But at NRL, they just kind of have more people doing stuff like this. Like they have an entire group that is doing your workshops and then like running poster sessions, so that they have a little more bandwidth to be able to organize something like this.
And then we got, is it Arlene? I think it's Arlene. Or no, Ariel. Oh my God. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm really bad at names, especially if the vowels get funky on me. Apologies. So regardless, you're asking about like, let's get down to the nitty gritty about a personal statement. I think that's the right thing to do because honestly, grades are fine, whatever. But institution to institution, grades don't necessarily tell us that much because we might not know your institution and like what a quote unquote good GPA is at your institution. And so the personal statement is often where we're really looking for information about like sort of the character of the candidate. Rachel, you've been through some of the review process, I think more than the others on the panel. You want to talk a little bit about some of the like the technical side of things, and maybe just steal wildly from the GRFP application in terms of advice?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, Times New Roman, 12-point font, your normal like 1-inch margins is probably a really good starting point and probably a really good ending point too.
Single spaced.
Yep. Yeah, single spaced. In terms of titles, I would say that don't include a title unless the RU application actually asks for it. I personally would not pay attention to a title if it showed up on an application that I was reading. Location of your name on the document. That's a good question because I know that our RU sort of asks it to be formatted like a letter. And some of them ask it be formatted more like an essay where you're putting your name like as a header. But yeah, definitely having your name on the document just somewhere, whether it's like a sign off like a letter or in the heading of your like Word document or something is good. That's probably good for formatting. I will say that just in terms of like contents, I prefer to see a little bit more of an informal prose. I find that if you become too formal, more like a cover letter, then it can get a little bit, I don't get a sense of this person's personality, which is, like Eric mentioned before, really important when you're spending 10 weeks, 11 weeks straight with someone. And there's a question from Sam about formatting as an essay. You would address it to whoever is reviewing the applications. And I think on the NSF website, there's usually a contact person. And that person is usually the best bet for writing it. Or you can just write it to like a general you.
Yeah, or like you could do like a Dear RU selection committee or something like that. So that's ultimately the committee that'll see it. Do you want to say a little bit about content within the personal statement? Because that, I mean, as somebody who has literal nightmares about writing personal statements from back in the day, because it's like the least well-defined thing. Do you want to try to take that one on?
Yeah, thinking back to personal statements that I've written, I sort of developed a bit of a formula for myself, which was writing down bullet points of my achievements or my prior experience, like resume style, and then sort of connecting those specific experiences to skills and outcomes. So like, I did this, what did I get out of it that will help me be the best researcher I can in your program?
And let me clarify here, because when you say skills, I think in your head and my head, you're saying things like communication or leadership, and not like, Visual Basic in Microsoft Excel or something like that. You're like, these are
Yeah.
like very sort of abstract skills,
Yes.
and lessons
Soft
learned.
skills, if you will.
Sorry, say that again?
Soft skills.
Soft
if you
skills,
will.
yeah. Because I think we're looking for students who we can make an impact on, right? Like, I
Mhm.
want to bring in students who really look back on the summer and they say to themselves, like, wow, that really changed me in a good way, hopefully. And, they're the students who are both receptive to change, but also can reflect back on it and realize that the change happened. That sort
Yeah.
of self-awareness. And so if you can sort of upfront demonstrate that self-awareness, that gives us hope that you're sort of in the process of maturing, or maybe you've already matured even, and that you're not, God forbid, still a 15-year-old. Yeah. Yeah, Giselle, you're up here on this next one with the Suli internship.
Sorry, I can't see questions.
Oh yeah, okay. So those questions for you. If you had a Suli internship at NREL, which that lab is more focused on renewable energy. The field you're in now is materials. Was your research experience over the summer at NREL based around renewable energy, or was it materials? I guess the answer is for both, actually. Those are massively overlapping fields. I just finished my Suli application for NREL and PNNL. Basically, it sounds like more than anything, Andrew wants to hear what it was like to be a Suli at NREL, like in terms of like that experience. It's a good question. There's just so many Suli opportunities out there.
Well, speaking to the field thing, I've always been interested in renewable energy since high school. And in my head, it just translated to, so I did my undergrad in electrical engineering, because that's how I thought it would relate. Since I was really interested in solar energy, solar power, solar cells. And I was thinking it's electrical that would allow me to do research in that. But it wasn't until I actually so I was out there making my own connections, talking to people from NREL, and that's when I realized that it's actually mainly material science that relate to a lot of stuff that I was interested in. And that's why I, got into material science for my PhD. Yeah, I guess and then on experience, I really, really enjoyed it, especially before COVID happened. It was like, I think that experience kind of answer a few of these questions too. Like, I really just sat next to the postdoc that was in my group, and I just saw how he works, like how he thinks. Like, I was able to know, a lot of the process and research, like what that really is like, and not what I think it's like in my head, which was very helpful. I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of these really great looking figures on great papers are actually just done in PowerPoint. Like, that's something I didn't know before.
Don't tell her dirty secrets. But you're right. Can you sort of briefly say like what a day in your life was like when you were a Suli student?
Yeah, so I kind of would get to work at like 8:30, and then I sat next to the postdoc I worked with, and I basically during my first Suli, I made solar cells. So I basically make the entire stack.
I love how casually you say that. I just make solar cells. That's hilarious.
Yeah, so I kind of just go in. It's actually like, sometimes I could get it done in a day, but it's normally like a 2-day process, just because of, how many people need to schedule to use the same equipment. I would go in and I would, prepare the substrate, and then I would make my solution. And then what I do spin coating. I make, some of the layers, and then I go on lunch, and I come back, and then the afternoon I go do some of the other layers, and then by the end, I have the entire solar cell and I have like a batch of them. And then I go measure the IV curves and then see if efficiency is high, like if what I did to it, if like treatments or whatever did its job and got like a high efficiency cell. And that's kind of like a simple research way for someone who was an undergrad. Like I wasn't doing super high level of thinking.
That highlights like a lot of the skills though, right? Like
Yeah,
from a skills point of view, there was a very particular recipe that no undergraduate would have learned about in any of their classes, regardless of what major they were, right? This was like NREL's secret recipe, or maybe not so secret, I don't know. And then, you came in, they taught the recipe to you. You understood sort of, at least probably vaguely initially, and probably more so as time went on, like why the recipe was what it was. And your core project was, hey Giselle, can you try to evolve the recipe to make a better cookie, right? Like we have a half decent cookie, let's make the best cookie we've ever made, right?
Yeah, we also it's also like reading papers and then seeing what people have done and then like maybe trying to apply some of the stuff to it. And then that's eventually how I got the paper. It was pretty cool making solar cells, even though most people find it like a tedious job, like because it's so much manual labor. But as my first research internship, I loved it.
Yeah, totally.
And I was also very happy. And they were saying that there's not a lot of people who could make solar cells like higher than 20%. And I was one of the 3 who was able to do in the entire NREL.
That's awesome. Vlad, do you want to hop in?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing because I want to clarify a couple of things because the way this question was posed could potentially indicate a point of confusion because it was posed as renewable energy and material science are 2 different things. They are actually not. I mean, there is a subfield of material science that is called materials for renewable energy. And both Eric and I are joint appointments with NREL. I was actually a SULI advisor at some point as well. And NREL within itself, within its structure, has a center for materials and chemistry. I don't really know the name, but there is a section of NREL that is solely dedicated to materials for renewable energy. And then you have materials for solar cells, for batteries, for this, for that. But there is such a field of material science that is materials for renewable energy, and we kind of all work in that field.
It's a small group over here in that sense. So hey, before we're starting to get a couple of people leaving, so I want to say like real loudly that we don't have enough applications for our REU this year compared to where we would historically have been, and so the odds of getting into the Mines Materials REU is, I'd say, significantly higher than normal. I don't know what the deal is this year, but somehow or another our advertising has failed us. So if you need an extension, feel free to email me because I know the deadline's like quite tight.
You want to say what that deadline is?
I think it's the end of the month right now, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, nominally the deadline's in 9 days, but if you send me an email, I'm guaranteed to say, okay, noted. Take your time. Cool. Do we have other questions from the audience? Going once, going twice. If not, maybe it's worth double checking the questions for the panelists over here and making sure that, this one. Let's go back to the stand out in a sea of applicants one, because that's a universally good skill to think about, regardless if we're talking about applicants or otherwise. Anybody feel like they want to take that one? Vlad, you're reading a bunch of graduate applications right now, which same problem, right? How do you pick who to actually follow up with?
Usually what stands out to me is, but grad applicants are a little bit different than REU, but in the context of grad applicants, which is the context my brain is in now, usually a good idea of what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah, it helps, doesn't it?
Like just saying I'm interested in doing grad school, but no real reasons, doesn't really reflect a mature thinking. So whatever you can do to kind of specify what you are interested in, even if you don't end up doing that. But
Yeah.
I was interested in many things and then didn't do them, but I at least developed some kind of view on the topic, and interest was well-founded. So
Yeah.
that kind of reflects the seriousness of your process of approach to things in life and so on.
And to add to that, like so I can tell you that I'm super interested in X. Do you believe me? I don't know. If you just tell me that, maybe not. So I think there's this aspect of saying, like, I assert that in the future, I want to grow up and be a X or something like that. To get there, I'm going to need X and Y. And, here are the things that I've already done when I look backwards in time that show that I'm not just making all of this up, right? Like, what have you done previously to do that? And the answer may be nothing. It may be, dude, I had to work at Wendy's to get myself to where I am today. And like, I've never had the bandwidth to do that. And I will absolutely take that answer, right? Because then at least you said, like, look, this is my dream. I haven't been able to follow it. And I've had to do this other crap instead. Respect, you're still fighting for the dream, even if that, like, fighting, it looks like you're working as a fry chef, or fry cook, that is. So yeah, and sort of in a similar vein, like, don't hesitate to highlight, like, non-scientific experiences that, like, highlight your character. I mean, Giselle talked about that earlier, but I like once I hired somebody simply because their application said, I have a mechanics degree in my motorcycle repair. I can, like, strip a motorcycle and rebuild it. And I said to myself, anybody who can, like, completely tear down a motorcycle and rebuild it, I'm sure we can do something good with them in the lab. I know I couldn't put a motorcycle back together. I'm not even sure I could take it apart. So, it's don't be afraid of the little things. So, like Rachel earlier was talking about, make a list of, like, things that you'd like the reviewer to know about. That list doesn't have to be strictly academic, right? That could be, I've spent the last 9 years caring for my grandmother, like, at 20 hours a week. It's been a huge burden, and, it has changed who I am for various reasons. Noted. That might actually be valuable to, like, understand that, you've carried a burden, and, like, you're still making it through with that burden. To Roger, the person interviewing you, unlikely at round 1. Will the person be the same person? There probably would be a follow-on interview where the answer would switch from a no to a yes. And that basically comes down to, let's say I'm doing admissions, and I'm like, man, this Roger guy, he seems freaking great. Let's bring him into this Mines REU. And then I'm thinking to myself, I read his application. It seems like he'd be good to work with Vladen. The last thing I want to do is say, hey, Vladen, guess what? I've already hired your student for you. It's Roger. And then, 4 weeks later, I get an email back saying, what have you done? This guy's burned my lab down, So it's good to get sort of consent continuously from all parties, essentially. Yeah.
So to summarize, the first round will probably be with the director of the REU. The second round will probably be with the person you're working with. If you make
Thanks,
it
Rachel.
long. Yeah.
That was way more coherent.
Okay.
Other research. Yeah, go for it.
I was just wondering with that interview thing though, because, like, to me, when I do an interview, it's the same. It's like goes both ways. I'm interviewing them too to see if it's a great fit for me.
Absolutely.
So that it's like like, I don't really care what research project I'm on so much. It's like who I'm working with is actually my number one concern.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, like, a well-run REU should give you a lot of decision-making power along the way, right? So, we might suggest, hey, Roger, I read your application, you and I interviewed well together. Why don't you go talk to Vladen, help you two arrange a meeting. You guys sort of sniff each other's butts, if to use a dog metaphor, see if you like each other. And, if Vladen's excited about you, and you're excited about him, great. If Vladen's excited about you, but you're not excited about him, that's when you'd email me and be like, well, I'm not sure this is a good fit, but, I would have had a negative from Vladen. Frankly, if I got a negative from Vladen, that would probably not be a good sign, right? Just not in terms of fit, but in terms of, like, ooh, I don't know, Roger said something terrible. So there's sort of a double interview process, and not all REUs will do that because, frankly, it's a lot of work. just to get faculty coordinated with students. But at least a first round interview I think is pretty standard. But agreed, like you should be interviewing back. And honestly, like in the interview process, I know Rachel and I have been on interviews together where the students had no questions for us. And we've been like, ooh, that's a giant red flag. Like they're sort of passively letting life happen to them. And that's creepy. Like they should be worried about their career advancement and thinking about, is this the right choice for me?
Yeah,
And
even if
also-
the
also
question
backwards.
is
Uh-huh.
like,
Yeah,
Rachel.
yeah,
yeah, even if the question is like, how do you like living in Golden? Like, what's it like there? It still shows that you have an interest. You're taking an active role in your own summer experience.
Yeah, even like the non-technical questions still show that like, you're intrigued. Honestly, the fact that y'all are showing up for this is an enormous good start, right? Because it shows that you're trying to take autonomy over your life and not let like just life happen to you, which it's kind of felt like the theme of the last 2 years. So that's good. Good luck, y'all. We're 52 after. Happy to shut it down unless there's anything else coming out of chat. Panelists, you want to have any final words on this? Vladden, let's do that. Vladden, what's your final message to the masses?
So final message to the masses is apply if you are interested and express your interest in as clearly as you can. We are not looking for, in the application for stylistic things. We are looking for the well-conveyed message that is clean and clear. So forget, literal kind of stylistic figures and all this stuff. Just try to convey the message briefly and effectively as you can, and try to somehow express your curiosity or interest into doing something, and reflect also that you're not just a passive observer of things around you, and that should get you somewhere.
Yeah.
About the interview process, I just want to add, you should absolutely be interviewing us.
Yeah. And to do that,
yeah.
Let me just point out, like, we haven't really brought up Google, but
yeah,
you should Google the hell out of us, right? I mean, you should find anything that the internet has to find about us. Dirty secrets, God knows what, but like, you want to roll in knowing who you're talking to. Yeah, embarrassing photos, all that good stuff. Right?
Yeah, and just last comment on that. Again, if during that interview you don't get a chance to ask question, that also says something about the professor you are talking with. Yeah. So look for those things. Check again if the professor is excited about the work that he's talking about. That again reflects on the interest of the professor. We are all usually passionate about things that we do, and we kind of are terrible at hiding it. So
yeah.
So look for those signs.
Vladden, we got a final question that sort of, since you already have the floor, why don't you just take it? So Mary's asking about your PI styles. Are you more hands-off or a meet multiple times a week PI? I think probably pertinent to the undergraduate, right?
Again,
I just got surprised by my last one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I got surprised because of the last PI I was assigned. I thought he was more hands-on, and then it was like meet once a week for 30 minutes, and that was it.
Did you have a graduate student that you were working with more closely or not?
No, I was working with someone part of the hydrology group at CU Boulder, and so he was like really busy with a bunch of like consulting projects and everything, and then also my PI for this research project.
So there was no like intermediary.
No.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah. And that's in the interview process. That's probably the biggest question is literally your question, right?
Yes.
Dear fancy professor, you're obviously fancy and you're probably not going to put more than an hour a week in with me. Who am I actually interacting with? Clearly I'm fancy, as you can tell. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, take it away, Vladden.
Okay, but you should also express what are your preferences in how to work.
True.
With, because your question kind of, when I read it first, I didn't know, are you asking, am I a control freak or am I, so I'm not personally a control freak, but that doesn't mean that I won't meet with you. And there should be an intermediary. So because you are also trying to learn some skills, and the skills are honestly better to learn from a grad student than from me. So in that sense, there will be always a grad student, at least in my group, who will be kind of working with you more tightly. And then I would be meeting once, twice a week, or depending on the need. I mean, if you express the need, I'm always there. It's during summer, we kind of have more time during summer than during academic years. So in my group, it's a little bit crafted based on the person, actually. So it's kind of customized. There is no one size fits all.
Yeah, and the amount of grad student interaction that you'll have will vary widely, and
yes,
it is one of the key failing points, I'd say, in REUs. Like my very first undergraduate research experience, I showed up, they trained me for 2 weeks, and the guy said, I'm about to go get married, and I'm gonna go on a month-long honeymoon, try not to burn the lab down. Fun fact, I actually did manage to set the lab on fire. So, there's a reason that people supervise people who don't know what they're doing. Yeah. Rachel, you want to do any sort of final words on your end that you don't feel like we covered enough?
Yeah, I would say just make sure that your personality comes through in the interview, in your essay responses. I would much rather hear about the weird thing that happened to your robot in your high school robotics competition, or how you took charge of it, rather than what coding language you used or something.
True. Yeah. Giselle, you started us off. You want to end us?
Yeah, I think from all the tips I gave, the one that I like the most is make connections. And I feel like that answers some of the questions that was asked to, for example, the interviewing question. I had, I guess, an informal interview, but I was ready to get asked stuff like, do you know anything about this specific thing? If you want to work for me. But it turned out more like, I just told him, I really like solar cells, and I want to maybe do grad school in material science. And then my PI started going off if you really want to do this one project's just going to be really great for you. And then he went up talking about how excited he is at doing this research, and how it's just he does something hands-on, and then he gets results, he measures it, and then got good results, and then he's very excited. And then that's exactly what I wanted to do, so I became very excited for that opportunity. So yeah, you really take that chance to know who you're working with, and I think that's very important.
Yeah. So I mean, to close out on my end, I just want to say that as much as we've talked about the tips and tricks of getting into an REU, I don't want you to leave with the sense that this is actually all that hard. You all can go do this. All we're trying to do is move your odds of success from 1 in 5 for a given REU to 1 in 2 or 1 in 3, right? Just because nobody likes to apply to a bunch of different things, that's a pain in the butt. And we also just want to make sure that you actually have a good REU experience, and you don't end up working for a jerk or in a badly run REU, etc. So hopefully you haven't walked away with a doom and gloom feeling. That's the opposite of our message. With that, thanks to y'all for coming.